Okay, today we're going to talk about the 5 parts of the story. Now, the 5 parts of the story is the basic structure for any short story or book or novel. Pretty much anything that is fiction has the 5 parts of the story in it in some version. It could be long, it could be short. It doesn't matter. As long as it's a fiction book, it will have all 5 parts of the story. If it's a non-fiction book, then you will not have the 5 parts of the story in it because it is all fact. So our 5 parts of the story are told with this plot chart we have right here. So our first part is called the exposition. The exposition is the beginning of our book. Okay, we in elementary school called parts of the story the beginning, middle, and end. We are no longer calling parts of the story that. We are now calling it the 5 parts of the story, and each part has its own name. So in the exposition, that was known as the beginning. Now there are 3 parts to the exposition. The first part is the setting, which is time and place. Then we have conflict, which is the problem. And then we have characters, like the main character. So these 3 things make up the exposition part of our story. You will have all 3 things in the exposition part. So we will know where and when the story takes place, we will know what the problem is, and we will know about the main character. The second part is called the rising action. Now the rising action is exactly like its title. It is all the events leading to the climax. Okay, and events. So that means it is plural. There's more than one event. This is going to be the biggest part of our novel or our story. Most of the action in our book is going to be part of the rising action. Everything is getting more excited. The conflict gets more complicated. Okay, again, most of our action and most of the storytelling is going to take place in the rising action. So here we have, in the beginning, we have our baseline knowledge. We have our baseline right here. Okay, so we find out our basic information, our setting, our conflict, and our characters. Then we move on to our rising action, which is going to be a larger part of the book. Okay, and it's exactly like the ranch shows. It's leading up to the big part, which is the climax. Okay, the climax can also be called the turning point. This is the biggest part of our book. It's the most exciting part. It is where the story changes. Okay, so we have our exposition, we have our rising action, all of our events leading up to our climax, which is the biggest, most exciting part. So, for example, if you were reading a mystery book, the exposition will introduce us to the characters, the setting, and the conflict. The rising action would be all the mysterious stuff that's happening, like all the clues that are leading us up to the climax, which is where we think, hey, we have this mystery figured out. Or if it's a suspense book, the rising action is all the scary stuff that's happening, and then the climax is where we're figuring out who is doing what or what's happening to make it so scary. Okay, so that's the climax. The climax is the turning point. Now, in our books, a lot of people think, well, because the climax is the third part of the story, that it's in the middle of the book, and that's not the case. The climax is actually more towards the end of the book. Most of the book, like I said, is going to be your rising action. Most of the book will be the rising action. And the climax is only one part. It is not many events like the rising action, it is one part. It is one thing. It is one event. Okay, the next one is our falling action. And like our rising action, our falling action is exactly how it's described. It is the events. Okay, and again, we have S here, so that means there's more than one event. Events leading to the end of our book. Okay, so we have our climax here. We have the most exciting point of our book, and then dang, it goes all the way down, all the way down. Okay, so our falling action falls us all the way to our last part of the story, which has many names. We have conclusion, we have resolution, and we have denouement. Denouement. Okay, this is the end of our book, or where the conflict gets solved. Okay, so again, our conclusion can be called conclusion, it can be called resolution, it can be called denouement, but it all means the same thing. It means it's the end of our book, the conflict gets solved, end of story. So just to review one more time, our 5 parts of the story, we have exposition with character setting and conflict. We have rising action, which are all of our events leading up to our climax, which is our turning point, which can also be called turning point. That's again where the story changes. It's the most exciting part. Then we fall all the way down with our falling action, which are our events leading to the end. And then we have our 5th part of the story, which is the conclusion, resolution, or denouement, which is the end, and our conflict gets solved.